But we got Jason Machowsky here from the Hospital for Special Surgery. He is a board-certified dietitian and exercise physiologist. So very happy to have you here today, Jason. How are you doing, Jason?
Doing pretty good. Just trying to stay warm in this cold New York air today, and yeah, enjoying it.
Yeah, I know we have a big old storm on our way. It sounds like coming in later this week. So runners, be on the lookout for that. If you're training, make sure you make those smart decisions with your training. Maybe push back that long run or do it up on the treadmill if you have those options. But again, let us know where you're watching from. Maybe you're watching from sunny Southern California or the warm areas of Florida, or maybe down in the Southern hemisphere where it's summertime and it's not winter. And always let us know your training questions, including the nutritional aspects of where your training is. Some good ideas. People always are questioning, what should I eat? When should I eat it? How much should I eat? Water, coffee, all these different things. We have a whole slew of information we're going to go at you with today. But again, I know as a runner myself and training for stuff, we're always kind of curious, how should my nutrition play into what I'm doing with my training? I know I have to get the miles in, but how do I incorporate that nutritional piece of the puzzle to then help me not only aid in my recovery when I'm doing the workouts that I have on my long runs, but then most importantly, when I get to March 20th or my goal race, I am ready to go. So Jason, when I look at my overall structure from a running perspective, I have my miles, I have my workouts, but how can runners kind of prepare or integrate good nutritional ideas into their 13-foot 1 mile journey?
So that's a really good question. The approach I often take with looking at nutrition for athletes, runners, etc., is that you have a kind of a pyramid, and you have the base of the pyramid, which is fundamental nutrition. So the nutrition that you need to fuel your body day to day, that you need for your body for good health and immunity, all those things, healthy body weight, all those things. Then there's performance nutrition, which is really for adaptation, as far as trying to get your muscles stronger, get faster, nutrition surrounding that. And then lastly, supplements, which might be the last little bits. And to people, that's kind of, people focus a lot on supplements, but essentially the last little piece, very small percentage of the gains you can be making. So when we're talking about adequately fueling your overall training journey, especially over a couple of months, it's really making sure that you're doing the things you need to be eating adequate fuel or calories to support your day-over-day training. So what you're going to need from a calories and carbs perspective will be a little different if you're, let's say, just running 3 days a week and maybe doing cross training once or twice, versus someone who is maybe running 5 or 6 days a week and doing a lot more additional activities. So you just want to make sure you're matching the amount of fuel you're taking into to kind of what you're burning. And then you can also just take a look at your body composition or body weight as a reflection. So again, if you are eating, if you're running a bunch and then, you're eating a lot and you're gaining weight and you're not intending to gain weight, that could be a factor that maybe you're having a little too much. And then vice versa, if you notice you're losing weight and maybe you weren't intending to, maybe you need to eat a little bit more. Also using your energy during your runs as a guide to see, are you eating enough fuel around your training times? In other words, if you're the type of person who will eat lunch at 12 or 1 and then go for a run after work at 5 before dinner, and you haven't eaten for 4 hours, and you're wondering, well, why do I feel like crap when I run? If you didn't eat anything for 5 hours, and that could be a factor. So planning a small snack in an hour or two before, whatever works for you, is a key factor. So I kind of tell people it's about making sure you're not having enough fuel day to day to support your training in a healthy way, and then also that you're getting adequate fuel around the training times, especially beforehand, so you can put in a good effort and then something afterwards to support recovery.
No, and that's great. I mean, I think that the key takeaway that I took from that, obviously, is a lot of information there. Is the overall arc on what we're trying to do when we look at our nutritional scale, is the idea of when we take those in, because obviously there are morning runners and there are evening runners. So again, as I look at, if I'm a morning runner, how much do I have to eat the day before? And then how much time do I need when I get up in the morning to make sure I adequately fuel? Because I probably have some onboard stores like set up. The body's kind of stored a few things, but how much do I need to eat if I have to do my a workout at 7 a.m.? What time do I have to get up? That kind of like working that backward time frame to kind of get some fuel on board to top off the source almost, or what is that last little bit that I need to kind of give me the energy that you talked about to be able to have that nice kick that I go through. So Good information there
And
for sure. And then again, I'm going to dive. Yeah, I mean, if you have any more information on that, please share that, because I mean, our runners are always curious
yeah,
to hear those kind of things.
piggyback on that. So like, I think everyone's a little individual, and some of it is also you take the research and the science and you apply it, and then you look at your own personal reactions to it, right? So if you're gonna do an early morning run, but maybe you eat a good dinner the night before, maybe you have a sensitive stomach in the morning, you can't tolerate that much, and you're not doing a super hard or heavy run, maybe you can get away with just like a glass of water, maybe just a half a piece of fruit or something, or nothing. And so I think it really comes down to like what allows you to have the performance you're targeting and the demand that's on your body and perform well. So I got plenty of people who can do kind of an easy morning run without anything on board besides maybe just some water and then wait to eat afterwards. I got other people who, if they don't eat anything beforehand, they're just going to feel like total crap. And I think some of it is taking the understanding of what you're doing and aligning it with what your body personally needs. And so for those people who can't eat well or don't feel like they can eat first thing in the morning, I will emphasize what is your fueling the night before to make sure you're as good as you can be. And then I would advise those people, maybe you don't do your hardest training runs first thing in the morning, unless it's a weekend and you have time to eat something and digest and then go on.
Yeah, and that's great. I think we always talk about, prepping for your workouts or prepping for, but obviously there's the nutrition aspect when we're on our run or doing our workout. What do we need, or what do we look at, and what is, we use the term good or bad, or what's gonna, what's ideal, I guess, because I think you touched on it. Every runner is a bit different, so they have to kind of figure out that little puzzle that they have to go through. So again, if I'm a runner and I'm getting ready for the United Airlines NYC half, and I'm looking at, I have a long run coming up in a couple of weeks, or maybe this coming Saturday, I've got 7 miles or 10 miles, wherever my training plan is calling for. What would, we'll call it good nutrition versus a bad nutrition? What would some of that look like? Obviously, if I'm running in the morning, that may incorporate some things I eat before I go out, and then on my run as well. Or even if I'm doing my workout later in the day, the prep stuff. What can a runner look at that would be a good versus a bad, knowing that everybody may be a bit different?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think good nutrition requires first understanding what you're currently doing. So I always suggest to people, if you haven't, I tell people, how many of you have a nutrition plan for, before, during, and after training? Some people raise their hands, some people don't. And I tell them, you all do, because you're doing something. You just might not have written it down, but what you're planning is maybe consciously or unconsciously. So the first thing I tell people is just write down what you're doing. So let's say if you're going to do a morning run, what did you eat and drink the night before? What did you have that morning? What are you doing during? What are you doing after? You don't have to change anything yet. Just first write it down and understand what you are or are not doing. And then also get a sense of how you're feeling with those training runs, right? Like, are you someone who's trying to just maximize pace and really crank up adaptation? Or are you someone who's just happy to finish the race and say, I did it and feel good and not have to worry about like the exact minutia of every iota of food going into my mouth? And so understanding where you are in that spectrum matters too. And so what I tell people is once you have that plan, we try to look for some kind of key factors. Are you having some fuel on board within the time frame prior to training that's giving you enough energy to get through your training feeling strong, right? So if you start to feel like, especially on the long run, you're lagging, you got to kind of look and say, okay, well, what am I taking in prior? What am I taking in during? Do I need to bump it up a little bit? Am I a heavy sweater? Am I a salty sweater? So again, if you're a heavy sweater, so in other words, like, if you're dripping wet during your warm-ups before you even start running, you may be a heavy sweater. If you get like white streaks on your clothing, if you get crystals on your skin when it dries, you may be a salty sweater, and a lot of people will sometimes be both. And so sometimes people can run into cramping issues or other issues which may not be related to fuel, but more related to hydration and electrolytes. And so I think understanding those aspects of yourself, of what your fuel on board is like, are you a heavy sweater or not? Are you a salty sweater or not? And then what are you doing around that concept? And kind of the things I tell people around training times are really, you're looking at total calories, but carbs, protein, fluid, and electrolytes. And are you hitting those key pieces around your training time to promote, the ability to train well and adapt and get stronger? And so I kind of tell people, if you're going, again, long times without eating, especially before, and that your performance suffers because of it, that's something to look into for either fueling before or during. If you go a long time without eating afterwards and you start to feel like crap afterwards too, maybe you should have a little something. I don't tell people you have to have a devoted like post-training snack if you're trying to watch your weight or other things. Sometimes I just tell people, make sure your next planned meal or snack in your life just coincides with the ending of your run, so you don't necessarily have to eat additional. On the flip side, if I have someone who's losing weight who doesn't want to be losing weight, I'm like, well, you better get something in right away and then something soon afterwards, and so on and so forth. So again, it's that personalized approach to providing the adequate fuel needed to adapt well and stay healthy.
Yeah, and that's great information. And I feel so seen in your comments because, like I talked about writing down like what we eat because we don't do anything. You're doing something. That was a great idea is to write down. I think if I wrote down actually what I ate, I may be embarrassed at some points, but that's okay. We all have our things. I'm already looking at lunch today. I'm thinking about a burrito, but hey, that's what I want to eat, and it sounds good today. I got my workouts in, so I'm all good to go. And the salty sweating thing is such a great point too, because again, everyone kind of is a bit different and depends on the areas that you train in. Obviously, if you're in the Northeast right now, it's colder time. We're very cold. Maybe you're not sweating as much as opposed to if you're in Florida or other parts of the world where it may be summertime. You could be sweating a lot. So always look at what's the elements that you're in as you go through. And you also touch you touched on a little bit about cramping. And I think we have a lot of runners that always ask us, it's like, oh, I'm running and my stomach hurts, or you always hear about the side stitches. What are some of the things that runners can look at it as a cause? And then what are some of the solutions if they're kind of dealing with that as they go through their training, those cramps, those side stitches that can help out and aid in that and, hopefully get around it.
Yeah. So when we talk about cramping, I really kind of break it down into three sources of where the cramps can come from. One is physiological, meaning, especially like if you're getting super jazzed about, a race or you're getting really psyched up, the fight or flight response can sometimes lead to some issues. You know, physiological, and then mechanical is also just like how you're running. What is your strength like? What is your running form like? Do you have like collapsed arches and you kind of tend to overpronate through your calf and things, and kind of you're not using your muscles correctly, your glutes or other things to support your running, and so then you're just kind of overstraining muscles in certain ways, so they're cramping as a protective mechanism. And so then I just try to, so when someone comes to me for nutrition and talks about cramping, I like to like kind of just go through those pieces first, just to see like, are you going through those things, and not doing anything wrong there. So then just to make sure that if it's something that's not nutrition, we can address it. A lot of times too, when people are running, if they're trying to run like drinking with like a cup or water, if they swallow a lot of air, that can create some GI issues. When it comes to cramping specifically, I'm really looking at, electrolytes and carbs and fluid. And typically, once I look at someone's training regimen, either they are really, there's a mismatch between what they're taking in and what their body needs, either because they are a heavy salty sweater and they're taking in an average amount of these things, or maybe they stopped eating their snack before training and now they're really underfueled, and then their mechanics get sloppy because they're tired. Um, Other times they're in a new environment that they got used to training at a certain temperature, and then there's a big spike in temperature and humidity. And we know that during hotter and more humid environments, there's a greater strain on the body and a greater need for those things, carbs, fluids, and electrolytes. And so I think sometimes there becomes a mismatch that way. So I always tell people, there's like the demand side and then there's the intake side, and that you always want to try to keep them together. And then if something either from the intake side goes down or the demand side goes up, it becomes a mismatch. And for some people, that can lead to cramping.
Sorry about that. I think I was on mute. Welcome to 2022, Ben. I apologize for that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great way that you talk about that, Jason. How you have that demand and the supply side. I think runners, you are giving and you're taking as you run. So again, if you're not really sure what's going on, it's a great way to tap in to see how you're feeling. Because again, it could just be something, a balance issue as you go through. I mean, obviously some days are going to be easier than others, but I think if the runners out there kind of look at it like that, they'll have a better idea to dial in to figure it out, because obviously as you go through your longer runs, whether it be a half marathon or marathon, those endurance events that we do have, making sure that you are feeding as much as you need is always a good thing. But I think we have some shout outs and some questions to go through here, Jason. So let's see where our runners are giving us some shout outs from. Monique is coming in from the Bronx, so obviously she's getting ready for some cold weather. Monique, thank you so much for listening to us today. JC Santa Teresa from Astoria. He's a pacer with the NYRR. JC, thank you so much for joining today. Rosario, 11 large from Manhattan. Thank you so much. You're probably just down the street, so I'll give you a wave. Dennis from New Jersey. Yeah, the Fred LeBeau half. It was a brisk one for sure. It seems that January has been coming at us pretty hard. So hope you had a good race, and hopefully you're thawed out and ready for the next round. Dub Denaro, what's up? It's your boy from San Antonio. Hopefully it's a little warmer down Texas way. Hopefully it's not too cold. I know we got some other storms coming through there, but always appreciate you coming in from Texas. And Lolo giving some love from New Jersey. I can already hear Steve, Coach Steve out in New Jersey, giving the woot. He's always loving when our New Jersey runners give us the love out there. So thank you so much, runners. Keep those shout outs coming in. Let us know where you're listening to us from. If we have any questions, we'll go ahead and take those, or we can move on to the hot new game show that is sweeping the land, which is our Fact or Fiction with Jason. Okay, Jason, we got some fact or fiction coming at you. Next to Wordle, this is the hottest new game in the United States. So let's get out of here. Let's see what we have here. Fact or fiction? Carb loading improves performance. Jason, what do you think? Fact or fiction?
Depends on the length of time that you're running. So there's a lot of good research that shows if you're doing longer runs, longer distances, the cutoff tends to actually be around that half marathon plus pace at 12, 15 plus miles. There is research that shows, and so especially marathons and marathon distances plus, that getting in more carbs on board in the days before will help performance. In other words, what you're doing is you're putting more gas into your gas tank, so you have more on board to run from, so you will have a kind of a lesser chance of bonking or running out of gas as you go. There's lots of different protocols that exist about how much you should take and how long and how many days. When I work with people, I really try to talk to them about what their preferences and tolerance are. So, there's the traditional big old plate of pasta the night before. Some people don't feel good with that. And the truth is you don't necessarily need to just have one big meal the night before, that you can actually do it over the course of a couple of days during your taper and load up gradually as well. So there's a lot of different approaches that can be taken to get that effect. But yes, it requires eating more carbs, which for a lot of people, they don't mind for some reason.
Yeah, carbs are good. I'm a big fan of carbs myself. I enjoy carbs a lot. Funny how that works. You have, again, I think we all, as runners, we tend to use our exercise as almost an excuse for what we choose to eat. And I think we've all had to learn that, yeah, while we can have, we can obviously, eat what we like, eat what we enjoy, but there is a certain amount of, we have to understand what we take in. Again, the point that you make, you have that demand and that supply. What you put in is what you're going to get out. So obviously, as much as, maybe you want to have that extra slice the night before, maybe think twice about that, because you never know what you got going on. But very good. Love that. Okay. Now, this actually is an interesting one, our next fact or fiction question, because you talked about the pyramid earlier. You had the three segments, and the top one you had was the supplements. So vitamins, are these essentials for runners during their training? Fact or fiction?
So, I think it depends who you talk to. So certainly I'll say, ideally we're all going to our doctors for, physicals to identify any deficiencies. So certainly if you're deficient in a vitamin, let's say vitamin D or iron or something like that, yes, you should definitely be supplementing based off your doctor's recommendations to get back to a normal level, because that can certainly hinder your performance as well as your health. So that, without a doubt, is valuable. as far as the act of taking like a multivitamin mineral, it is true during periods of higher demand, there are, certain nutrients that may be under greater taxing, might be taxed a little greater. Ideally, if you're eating balanced food, fruits, vegetables, enough whole grains, carbs, lean proteins, healthy fats, ideally you would be covering all those bases. I'm not opposed to people taking like a multivitamin mineral as an insurance policy. I think it's worst case scenario, you're probably, peeing out some dollars. Um, but beyond that, you know, um, especially if it gives you as an individual peace of mind, the biggest thing is again feeling how you're performing, getting your annual physicals and wellness checks to see if something is off, or if you're feeling off, getting it checked out. So again, I don't recommend it to every single person who crosses my path, but through getting to know an individual and what their preferences are, what their eating habits are like, are they on a restricted diet? Are they gluten-free, dairy-free? Are they vegan? If I know that there are certain nutrients that they're lacking because of the way they're eating, then certainly supplementation, as far as vitamins and minerals goes, can come into the equation.
Yeah, and you made the point, or the first part about that. We are seeing our doctors on a regular basis. That's the best course of action, because they're the ones that are going to help us determine where we need to be to make sure that we have a good overall physical and health picture as we start on any kind of training. So great advice. Well, this next fact or fiction, Jason, I have a personal stake in. Coffee. Will coffee dehydrate you? I need to know this because I've had a few cups today. I want to make sure that I'm doing okay later. So what do you got for us, Jason? Fact or fiction? Coffee will dehydrate us.
So I think coffee in that in that context, gets a bit of a bum rap. What I will say is it's not actively dehydrating. In other words, like drinking an 8-ounce cup of coffee isn't going to make you lose 10 ounces of fluid. So in other words, it's not actively negating the fluid you're taking in. What I would say is that, it is not necessarily assimilated as well as like 8 ounces of water. So again, I still haven't seen a study. I'm itching to see this study, or if someone knows out there where this study is. I'd love to understand, if someone drank a 10-ounce cup of coffee, how much fluid actually gets into the system? Is it the full 10 ounces? I think most people agree it's maybe not the full 10 ounces. Maybe it's 8, maybe it's 7, maybe it's 6, who knows? But what it does do is it creates a diuretic effect. In other words, it makes you have to go to the bathroom many times. So you get this sense of, oh, I drank a cup of coffee, I gotta go pee, I'm getting dehydrated. It's just moving along what was already happening naturally more than anything. So if you were dehydrated, it's just gonna keep that going along. If you're well hydrated, it's making you go to the bathroom sooner. So I kind of tell people it's not necessarily as hydrating as maybe the equivalent of water, but it's not dehydrating, if that makes sense.
Well, that's good to hear, because I've had 3 cups of coffee today, but I always have my water nearby as well. So I'm making sure I stay on top of that, Jason. So runners out there, good news if you're a coffee drinker like myself. But again, always moderation, and always figure out what works best for you.
Actually,
and then the next one up here on fact or fiction, so important here. Go ahead.
Oh, I just want to add one thing. There's a really simple way you can test and see whether you are relatively well hydrated throughout the day. Going to the bathroom. Are you going to the bathroom peeing at least a few times during the day? Yes or no? And if you are, is your urine straw yellow or lighter? Yes or no? If you are going to the bathroom periodically throughout the day and your urine is straw yellow or lighter, regardless of whether you've had coffee, you are most likely well hydrated for the day. So let's talk about like during runs themselves and those specific things. But if you look for overall hydration, those are the kind of key markers. If those are off, then we talk about adequate hydration. Sorry, I just want to leave that there.
No, that's perfect, and that's very important to say. I mean, your urine tells you a lot. So if you're going to the bathroom, the color of it is a great way to look at it. And again, it goes back to some of our earlier points. Are you a morning runner, or are you an afternoon runner? I mean, those will obviously play into it as you hydrate in the evening. All those kind of things. You want to make sure that you can get yourself ready to go, regardless of the time of day that you are running out there. So our next factor for fiction, again, kind of close to my heart, as I do like to bake. I am a baker. Sugar. Is sugar bad for athletes? I'm going to try not to cry if you say it is here, but we'll go for it.
Well, I mean, I think sugar, in and of itself is a source of carbohydrates readily absorbed. and it's a fuel, right? So that's what sugar is. When you take in large amounts of sugar and you're not burning it, it's not necessarily the best thing for you. If you're taking in sugar and you are actively burning it for fuel, it can be a great source of quick energy. Pretty much all sports confectionery is sugar. There's goos, gels, jelly beans, chews, sports drinks. It is sugar or variations of sugar. You can talk about the slow release ones, the waxy mazes, and these other things. It's all some permutation of sugar or starch that is broken down by the body for quick sources of fuel to fuel the demands on your body, which is you running. If you then sit all day and pound 6 Gatorades and eat 7, pastries, and then you're wondering why like your blood sugar is spiking and you're gaining weight, well, then that's a different story. And so I kind of tell people is you use sugar for what it's needed and maybe not so much when it's not.
Yeah, that's spot on. It's so important again. So yeah, remember that it's always because you are absolutely right. Every gel pack that a runner has sugar in it. So again, it's the moderation that you use, but obviously it goes back into earlier. You have the pyramid. You know what you need to do out there. Take care of yourself. What you put in is what you're going to get out of it. Runners always keep that in mind. And then our last but not least factor fiction, Jason, should I drink when I'm thirsty? How should runners gauge that, whether in the day-to-day or even on their run? What should we be looking at there?
Well, first question is, what are you drinking? But if we're assuming, like fluids, sports drinks, that sort of thing,
Right.
I think there's been endless debate over the years about is thirst an adequate indicator of hydration. I think during periods of mild temperature, lower intensity activity, where you have time to get that sensation, yes, it could be, but I also think during other periods of time, it may not be. So, one thing to bear in mind is if you're doing super high intensity, longer duration, hotter humid environment, even extreme cold can blunt the thirst drive. Also, being older, you can lose your thirst drive as you get older. So if you're kind of an older runner, bear in mind that your thirst drive may not be as well. So I think what I tell people is if you're in these situations and you notice yourself, especially having symptoms of dehydration, which again, it can affect focus and fatigue and performance and loss of energy and those things. And then you look at like, wow, I haven't drank any water for like the past 2 hours. And now I'm like, and then it becomes self-apparent that like, wow, I haven't drank anything. Or maybe I'm just not drinking enough because I'm a super heavy sweater. And that's okay too. I worked with a runner recently with that situation. He was doing a good job from an average sweat and electrolyte standpoint, but he is a super heavy, salty sweater, very fast, runner. And he just burns, he's around 3-hour marathon and he wants to get into the twos, and he just would tank because he just wasn't taking enough early on. And not that he wasn't taking in anything, but he would just needed more. And so I think that's the idea behind understanding where the thirst comes into play, what you're doing, how long you're doing it for, and what the environment is.
Yeah, and that's spot on, Jason. It's always, again, all the elements around us play in. I mean, right now we talk to our runners. It is cold here in the Northeast, or if you're playing in winter conditions, sometimes you may not feel like I'm thirsty, but you are still sweating. You're still going through the electrolytes, the hydration you have, and it's very easy to, oh, I'm not sweating as bad today. I'm not feeling like I'm sweating like if you're running in July or August here on the East Coast, where we have very hot and humid conditions. So again, the runners need to be very aware of the elements that they're in, and track those things, because again, you want to make sure that you've got the ability to stay on top of the hydration. Because I think of the example that you said, Jason, it's if you're a heavy sweater, and we all know a few runners, I put myself in that category during certain times of year, you need more. So always making sure that you have something on tap around to go there. But I know we have more shout outs and more questions coming our way. So let's jump in and see who's out there listening to us, maybe somewhere warm. We can live vicariously through our listeners. Here we go. We have, I believe that's Janetia from Illinois. Don't think it's very warm out there, so hopefully you're staying warm out there in Illinois. Thank you so much for listening to us. Rebecca from the Upper East Side, cold running in Central Park this morning. Yes, it was quite brisk. I think it feels like was about 11 degrees around 7 a.m. So hopefully you bundled up and had a good old run out there, Rebecca. Joan from across the Atlantic from Ireland, thank you so much for tuning in. It's almost 5:30 in the evening there, so hopefully your day is going well as you wrap up your Wednesday. Johnny coming out, working at JFK International Airport. Hey, thank you so much. Hopefully everything's going okay today in the airport, getting our travelers in and out. I'm sure there'll be a few more coming in for the United Airlines NYC half on March 20th. Give him a shout out if you see him coming into town, Johnny. Thank you so much. And we have our question from Dennis. He's training for the NYC half. I'd like to improve my time by about 3 to 5 minutes from my last half. Is that a realistic goal? I know, not knowing the full scope of the training plan that you have or where you are currently, I think that's a safe estimate that you know, depending on what you're training for. Again, if the training plan you have currently is setting you up to work towards the time that you want, and you're doing the speed workouts and the long runs, and you're getting the proper rest and the nutrition, I don't think that's a number that's so far out of where you currently are to get there. Again, not sure when your last half marathon was, if it was just in 2021 or if it was 2020 or 2019. Again, where your level of fitness is currently as well will always kind of play into that. But again, if you're feeling pretty well trained as you come into your training cycle, 3 to 5 minutes is not a mountain to climb to get over. We'll be working hard. I mean, that is still some time you have to get through there. Those last few miles on the NYC half will definitely test you. That last 5K is where you're going to have to kind of move through that. But again, not knowing the full scope of where you are or when your last half marathon was, I think that's, a 3 to 5 minute range is pretty safe. So go for it, go at it, and let us know how it happens for you on March 20th. Rosario got a great question. Here we go, Jason. This is probably going to be coming your way. Beginning runner, you mentioned the balance of carbs, fluid, and electrolytes. Based on our experience, yours and mine, are there any electrolyte drinks that you would prefer, recommend? What have you come across in your days as as a runner or as working with some of the runners you have? Is there what's out there for runners to try?
Yeah, so I think just to quickly jump back to the first question, I always like those kind of high-level questions, and I always ask, what's your training experience like, right? So, like, if you're an experienced runner who's been running for 8 years and your half pace is, really good, shaving 3 minutes is much harder to do than someone who's done a couple of halves and is new and has been training a bit. And so it's kind of like that recency effect as well. So it's worth keeping in mind, like, where you lie on that spectrum. But to everything you're saying, those are all key pieces for sure, making sure those things are on point. Rosario, great question. So again, I will just say off the bat, I am electrolyte drink agnostic. In other words, meaning I don't push a particular brand. There's so many out there. The main things that I look for with people is that it is a good balance for them based off of the amount of carbs, fuel that they need, the amount of fluid in ounces, and then the electrolytes. So some sports drinks are higher in electrolytes than others. So if I have a salty sweater, I will usually push them towards a higher electrolyte sports drink or powders. Truthfully, a lot of times, most prefabricated or pre-made sports drinks tend not to be higher. Usually I have to give people like certain powders. So I'm going to throw out some brands. I have no financial relationship with any of them. But I think ones that tend to be higher in electrolytes currently on the market, and I know I'm going to miss like 4 of them. I'm sure a rep is going to be on this thing and be angry at me. But Noon Electrolyte, LMNT, Liquid IV, Pedialyte, I think Drip Drop. There's a bunch of them out there, and there's more. In other words, so I tell people, like, those are maybe the higher electrolyte things. A lot of the basic ones, your Powerades, your Gatorades, all totally fine. They are designed to kind of hit that sweet spot for the vast majority of people, who just need something, that right blend of carbs, fluid, electrolytes together. There's all sorts of other ones, Clean Athletes, Scratch Labs. There's like literally there are dozens and dozens of manufacturers who make these things. And then it becomes a matter of both trying it out. So I kind of just make sure you're getting in all three. Um, it doesn't all have to be in the drink. So if you want to have a food-based carb, like you want to munch on something, then just make sure you're getting your fluid and your electrolytes. So sometimes I'll just make a bottle of water and put a pinch of salt in it. And I tell people, if you can taste, you can put a pinch of salt. If you can taste the salt, it's too salty. Other things you can do is you can actually make your own kind of fruit juice kind of electrolyte blend, so your own homemade sports drink with fruit juices. There are certain types of fruit juices that kind of blend themselves well to a nice glucose fructose combination, like carrots and pineapple and coconut and a few other ones. If you mix them in certain amounts, they can usually be pretty good. And then you add a pinch of salt, and they come out pretty good and tasty as well. So if you didn't want to like necessarily buy one, but also make your own, there is a possibility. And then so I tell people the other key thing between all this is that it tastes good to you, so you're willing to drink it, and it sits well in your stomach. Because I get plenty of people who come in and say, I'm taking X, it makes me feel like crap. I'm like, why don't you try Y or Z? And they're like, oh, okay, yeah. So like there's so much of that personal reaction to it as well that is just as important. Because I always tell people I can always figure out what you need from a carb food electrolyte standpoint, and then we come up with ideas of these are the things you can try to achieve that.
Yeah, and the last part is try it, try it, try it, try it. That's what the training plan is for. That's part of the whole art. So when you get to race day, you've already mapped all of this out. You know what works well and when
Mm-hmm.
you take it. Because last thing you want to do is sit there
Mm-hmm.
and whoever you're working with, if it's Jason or another dietitian or anybody out there who's giving you some tips, is to give you something 2 weeks before your race. At that point, you probably want to be careful about what you're trying out. So get those ideas now. Try some great ideas from Jason on what you can try. He said there's a myriad of options out there. So try it out, please, Rosario. Let us know what's working out for you. I'd love to hear it. Again, always like to pass on information to our community, and best of luck in what you're going. But I think we have a few more questions coming our way. So what else we got? We got Jossie Burke, always turning in. What is the difference in performance improvement if we need to do treadmill workouts, I'm guessing, versus running outside? Do you have any thoughts on that yourself, Jason? I don't know. I don't run too much on a treadmill. I tend to do most of my workouts outside. I know the treadmill has a lot of different variations, but do you have any personal experience with treadmill versus outdoor?
I mean, I think a lot of it just has to do with like the work you put in and the comfort level you have on it. There's a lot of people say, to try to mimic outdoors, you try to set the incline to one, the feel of the belt is going to be different, like on a woodway versus like, another version, like fitness or a Cybex or just whatever you got, or Precarbs. I want to name enough brands, so I'm not picking favorites or anything. Um, so yeah, I think there's just a lot of factors, but I think there's also just a natural variance of your pace that occurs and the natural variance of incline that and decline that occurs when you run outside that doesn't occur on a treadmill workout. So I think from that standpoint, there might be some nuances that you get from being outdoors, the elements, cold, wind, heat. So again, if you're used to training in a temperate environment all day and then race day is like brutal, it's going to be a whole different experience for you too. So like I think those are just the things to consider.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I mean, always, get in there. I mean, I know sometimes people use a treadmill for certain things, whether it be their easy days or their long run days. If you're just looking for that nice cadence, you just kind of run. You don't want to have a variance or anything. Obviously, if you're doing speed workout, it may be a bit more difficult unless the device you're on has the ability to pre-program, and then it does all the work for you. Just hit start, and then all of a sudden things happen during the workout, so you can get that. And sometimes, Jason says, depending on what apparatus you're using, it could be a bit of a softer ride. Again, we do a lot of miles when we're training, so varying the terrain you're on, softer surfaces is always good to give your body a little bit of a break, especially on maybe some of those easier run days where you just kind of got to get a few, maybe some 30 minutes in or 40 minutes in to keep your body just kind of moving forward for that day. But great information, Josh. I hope everything's going in. We got more questions coming at us here. So what else we got? This is our final question for the day from Anne. Here we go. When I ran the Fred Lebow half marathon this past weekend, my hands started to swell during my second loop. How can I prevent this from happening? It's an interesting one, Jason. I know it was pretty cold that day. I'm not sure if she was wearing gloves. And let us know if you were wearing gloves at some point. Maybe took them off, if you kept them on the whole time. If you're supposed to have a follow up on that, please let us know on that piece for sure. But Jason, any ideas of what may have been happening here with Anne as she was going through with some swelling?
I mean, that's a good question. As far as like blood pooling, it could be like how she was holding her body, if she was maybe more rigid, because of the cold. I really like to get a sense of like the factors. Oh, if this is something that's happened in the past and is like a repeated event, I would just start to dig into like, was there something different about the fueling or the nutrition versus what she normally may have done? Um, as far as like blood pooling, to me, it's sometimes my initial thought is positional. Also just blood flow and kind of in the cold and a restriction of blood flow as well. Could be a factor. So again, nothing. I'm not saying that there couldn't be a nutritional factor. It's just it's not the first things that come to my mind, unless there was like a huge departure from what she had been doing previously for her nutrition.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was a cold day, so I'm curious if she did have some heat, because obviously our bodies, the blood tends to pull to keep us, our cores warm when we first start. So on the second loop, if she was wearing
Yeah,
gloves and took them off for any reason, again, to your point, was there some transfer
yeah.
of going on there? But again, if it has happened before, it was the first time, something obviously to be very mindful of. But if this is a recurring condition you have, whether it be in the winter months when it's colder, in the warmer months, if it's all the time, these are one of those questions where you probably want to reach out, if you have a primary care physician, to kind of figure out what's going on. Because again, you also want to make sure that any kind of swelling when you're running like that, or any kind of things that pop up that are concerning, you want to talk to a trained physician to kind of give you some insight, because you want you to be safe out there and have a good time running. But I think that's all we have for today, Jason. Any parting thoughts on nutritional aspects for our runners out there? Any final fact or fiction, or just good points as we head out the door?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that I failed to mention earlier about like kind of good nutrition too is that like, there's also the possibility that like you could be eating too much or having too much too close. Like if you have a sensitive stomach or you have a lot of fat or fiber like right before training, if you feel like you eat something, you have a rock in your gut and you don't feel good training, don't force feed yourself either. You maybe need to eat something a little lighter, change up what you're having, especially if it's like really heavy. So like my favorite like training food that I always like bring up as like the like two camps situation is like peanut butter and jelly. Like there are some groups of people who will pound PB&Js all day around training and love it. Another group, the peanut butter is just too heavy for them and they feel like too burdened by it. And so again, what it brings me back to is like we use the science to give guidance on what may work best, but it's the personal integration of the science and the feedback that you get as a runner and that you can give me as a practitioner that allows us to fine tune those guidelines or evidence-based guidance to the best approach for you as an individual. So I want you to know that there isn't one best thing. It is the thing that works best for you through educated experimentation.
And that's great. And it's funny you bring up the peanut butter and jelly. In 2018, I was running the TCS New York City Marathon, and we came by a runner who had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich pinned to the back of his shirt. So obviously he is very much a peanut butter, and in the club you have, he's very much of the PB&J fan club, as he felt that was his perfect fuel source. I will never forget it. It was an amazing thing to witness. But then again, we witness lots of things when you run a marathon. But that's one thing that has stuck with me throughout the years. Well, I am really excited about the United Airlines NYC half coming up, Jason. Thank you so much for all of your tips today. Some great ideas for our runners out there for the nutritional aspect of their training. Runners, have a great Wednesday, and we will see you back again soon. Jason, thank you so much for being with us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Take care, everyone.
Take care,
Have a great
runners.
day.
Bye-bye.